Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Rishi Sunak crashed and burned in the first decently organised election event he's had to take part in. BBC's Question Time special yesterday evening. Now, the host, Fiona Bruce, did her best to bat for the Tories as usual, but despite irritating people with the interruptions she was not supposed to make, did little to derail things. This was actually a well-organised question and answer session with the leaders of Labour, the SNP, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. The leaders were given a decent amount of time to respond when Bruce wasn't butting in, meaning that nuance was possible in a way that had been impossible in other hustings and debates. For example, Keir Starmer was given a question on trans issues, and once he had the time to give a detailed, nuanced answer, instead of just a quick soundbite, what he came up with was actually quite good. It may actually be the first time we've seen a top politician actually be allowed to talk about sex and gender separately. And that was because the format allowed for real answers. We should have more of it. Ed Davey, despite the barracking, maybe because of it, came across very well. He drew a lot of praise for the way he was able to give account of the mistakes made during the coalition years, for which there was an excessive, in my opinion, amount of focus, but also linking his eyebrow-raising campaign stunts with the serious policies behind them. In fact, Davies' performance highlighted, I think, one of the ways in which the media does a huge disservice to our society. This was probably the first time that the public have been allowed to really hear what the Lib Dems had to say on a national level. You know, he was on Laura Consberg on Sunday. She had no interest in letting anyone other than a Tory talk about policies which may be of interest to the public. You know, you wonder how different our political attitudes might be if the media, as it should, dedicated time on their current affairs programmes to the different parties and their representatives in proportion to their elected footprint. This would have meant a greater focus on the Lib Dems in this campaign, more from the Greens than we've had, and we'd have had almost nothing from Reform UK. In fact, in strict political footprint terms, the public should know about as much about Reform UK as they do Galloway's Workers' Party. And you think, oh yeah, but Reform UK are on for a higher share of the vote. Because the mainstream media kept platforming them when they were down at like 1% of the vote. You know, this is why when considering the problems we face in the UK, ultimately all goes back down to the media. Media reform's such an imperative. But anyway, never mind that now. The point is, the format was good. Starmer, Davey, Swinney and Sunak were all given a very fair platform. They were all on stage on their own. The other leaders were off. They couldn't heckle or anything like that. They took questions from the audience. They were given the time and space to give considered answers. And they could have a bit of a back and forth as well. It wasn't just, oh, that's your question. Thank you. I'll now rabbit on for 2 minutes. It was like they talk for a bit and then, okay, you want to come back in there? Come back in there. And then I'll answer that bit as well. It was very good. And so they all had the opportunity to give a good account of themselves. And 3 of them took the opportunity to do so and came away with their campaign enhanced. One, not so much. Sunak was the last to face the audience. Did not go well for him. I mean, how can I put this as simply as possible before going over a few details? Now, obviously, the audience was very mixed. Some of them will have liked this because of party politics or whatever, will have liked this person, not this person, not this person. So all of those leaders who came out will have had a section of that audience that didn't approve of them, for example. But at the end of each of the previous leaders' turns, they were applauded by the audience. All standard, you would think, just good manners. They've had their questions answered, and despite what they may thought of the politics personally, they've done their job. Yeah, they've come on stage. They've answered our questions. We thank them for talking to us. Sunak was effectively booed off. Now, it's a slightly different situation, to be fair. You could argue because Sunak was the last on, we didn't really see him go off, but he was booed after his final word. There were multiple times when the audience made their disapproval of his responses known. Like, it's not even like it was a mixed bag. Like with the others, you can get a mixed bag. You know, with the other ones, it's like, okay, we like that, we don't like that. There was none of that with Sunak. He just bombed on everything. The audience were not impressed with his attacks on our international obligations. They weren't impressed with talk of tax cuts, which is pretty much the only That's their two lines, isn't it? Tax cuts. Tax cuts is what got him booed at the end as well. Tax cuts and isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. It didn't help that Sunak actually started arguing with the audience as well. I know I keep saying that Sunak knows nothing about politics, but when you say something like that about a person, what you actually mean is they don't know enough. They don't know as much as they should, or they don't know enough to talk about the thing they're trying to talk about. Sunak really does know nothing, doesn't he? He's crashing in the polls. The polls are worsening. He's facing the worst defeat in the centuries-old history of his party. 2 weeks before polling day, with his campaign director having recently had to step down, and Sunak decides this is the moment to pick a fight with the public. 10 out of 10 for originality. Is Dominic Cummings still advising him to do mental stuff? It's worth pointing out that Sunak actually lied during the programme as well about, we talk about the European Convention on Human Rights, for example, the validity of his Rwanda safety bill. He said, it's all in compliance with international law, is a lie. Shocking, I know, but the point is it made no difference. The audience weren't impressed. Not because lies don't work. Of course they work. There's a reason why politics has been such a dishonest profession for thousands of years. It's because once a government is not delivering on anything, the public just have no reason to believe them. So your lies then are much less effective. And this is where Sunak and his team keep making a huge strategic error, I feel. He went into that programme trying to persuade the audience of various points of view. The fact that those points of view were lies is irrelevant. Sunak has no powers of persuasion anymore. It's impossible to do. It's quite hard to do in politics at any time. Sometimes, like when Labour, for example, have adopted a particular position that both we and they know isn't quite right, it's to align with the public mood. It's how politics is done. And someone asked, well, why don't Labour just explain this? Because it's all lies. Why don't they just explain to the public the truth about the policy? And my response was, the Labour Party are, like almost every other party, never given a fair hearing in the mainstream media and couldn't even persuade the public to vote for them over Dodgy Dave, Coughing Fit Theresa, or Gets Drunk with Russian Agents Johnson. Aligning and nudging to a better position is the best you can manage in politics. You have to bring people with you, and people don't move quickly. Align and nudge. Sunak was flying in the face of public opinion last night. You can't even do that if you've got a stock of credibility with the public, unless you are really stunningly persuasive. What Sunak needed to be able to do, to have any chance of getting through that, was respond in a way which acknowledged the reality that the public can see with their own eyes, and then explain how he was going to correct the course. He was never coming out of it well because of his record of failure from himself personally, his government over 14 years. There was no way of getting through this well, but he could have come through without further damage. But when you get the audience shouting shame at you and booing you at the end, you've either got the wrong audience or you've adopted the wrong pitch. Previously, Sunak had been given kind, soft questions from journalists or a format that allowed him to throw out a quick soundbite and then shout over others. This was the first time when he wasn't on stage at the same time as his opponents, so he couldn't interrupt them. He had half an hour taking questions from the public, not some career journalist who doesn't want to shit the bed, and he was afforded enough time to give thoughtful, detailed answers. Problem was he didn't have any. It's a constant source of amazement to me. Sunak keeps doing the same things in the same ways, getting terrible results, and then carries on doing the same things in the same ways. Take the way he tackled the betting scandal. He said he was angry about it, like Ellie was. He was told about it over 2 weeks ago and did nothing. He also said he would boot out anyone found guilty of illegal gambling. So just as in the past, just as in every time in the past, when an obviously corrupt behaviour comes to light, and he's all like, oh yeah, well, we'll have to have an investigation. Whether or not they are guilty of a criminal offence, which I'm obviously not qualified to pronounce, they have clearly placed bets on what they knew to be certainties. It's fundamentally dishonest. The furthest thing from integrity in public office. And yet Sunak hides behind the fact that maybe the offence isn't as serious as it might be. Oh yeah, they may have actually disgraced politics, but maybe they didn't break the law. Let the courts decide whether they broke the law or not. You decide whether they have disgraced politics. They have done. What are you going to do about it? The entire thing was a study in how not to do leadership, how not to do governance, and how not to do politics, all rolled into one. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.